So I've got Tony Waits here from Hospital, and great that you come on this Leicester Study tour. Can you just tell us what you get out of coming into a tour like this?
I think with the study tours you get insight into buildings when they're living and breathing like buildings. So I think it's really nice to see how residents choose a building. It's interesting how your operations teams work inside. So I think it's that insight that you just don't get unless you go.
Yeah, and you get lots of learning out of it. Things that you wouldn't necessarily see just by talking to an operator.
Absolutely. So things like stabilisation of a building, things like understanding how amenity space is used. It's interesting that cats cause more damage than dogs. I think that's stuff that doesn't crop up in conversation, but when you're in the buildings and having these conversations, you just find those kind of things.
Will you come back to another one?
100%.
Oh, thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here with Claire Johnson from Centric, and really big supporters of the Association of Friends of Living. So Claire, what are you finding, how are you finding the tour? What are you getting out of this?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually to come to Leicester today to have a look at the various BTR schemes that are in operation here. We actually operate a scheme, the Saxon, so it's great to see ultimately what our customers are seeing when they're looking for a rental living product. So that's one of the things that I'm definitely gauging from today is what rental living opportunities there are available for people in the area. But also it's great to see what my colleagues are doing across the BTR sector and how they're engaging with their customers and what they're bringing to life in terms of the environments that they're creating. So that's been a really great opportunity for me to experience that.
You learned anything you didn't know before?
Yeah, I think I have actually, because from my perspective, I have a perception of what other BTR operators are doing and what other BTR living environments are like. So actually coming into them, there's been a couple of times where I've had a bit of a wow factor and gone, this is brilliant, this is really interesting. And from my perspective, a lot of what I do is about sort of design for management and how that plays into that living environment. So to come here today and see what works and actually what doesn't work, but ultimately there's been a quite heavy emphasis on wow, this is fantastic. Yeah, it's been really good.
This is great. Why don't you enjoy the study tour?
Thank you.
The afternoon to come.
Definitely, brilliant.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
So I'm here with Joe Wilson from Long Harbour, who's done a great job today presenting Auckland, and you've been various in concepts, but you've also been a part of the tour today. So what have you learned today?
I mean, today's been awesome. I think what's been really interesting is seeing all of the different products across Leicester and understanding how they sit in the context of one another. I mean, we have the Walkham, which is kind of very high amenity, high spec, and it was awesome going to other assets which are more of an active asset management strategy, like for example the John Lewis asset, where we could see them refurbishing the units as we went along, and it was just fascinating to see that strategy in play.
That's great. And so, will you come on another tour?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, in a heartbeat.
You say about learning it, and you've seen how people are doing things differently as well.
Yeah, it's a deployment of different strategies. Like I said, I thought that the one we saw from John Lewis was really fascinating. It's very different to what we do, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, it's just different. And I think kind of learning and exchanging those strategies in the industry was really insightful, and it was great to see it take place.
Thanks for coming to the study tour again today. No, I know you love a study tour, but what have you learned about Leicester as well?
Well, I am a study tour veteran, so I think this is coming up to be my 8th. Leicester's just amazing. First of all, I've actually never been here, so that was quite embarrassing, but I'm glad I finally got here. Learned a lot of things, obviously, about Leicester itself. They found a king in a car park, so that's one thing. But in terms of build to rent, I think it's absolutely incredible. We saw some really interesting sites. They were at different mobilization points, some were going through refurbishment, and some were just new, coming up to their renewal period here. I think in terms of build to rent branding, it's clear now more than ever some of the kind of personal business choices in terms of your space is more dynamic, more attractive to renters. And also, I think it's quite nice to see more of the focus be on the residents rather than this amenity arms race. There's been a slowing. I mean, we did get to see a pool today, which was amazing. I would never turn down a pool, but what I would say is it's been really interesting to see the resources going into that resident experience, making sure that they're comfortable, making sure that you're mindful of them when going through a refurbishment. And I think what's been quite interesting is there are different parts in the city. So seeing the offering not just be city focused has been actually quite refreshing as well. But obviously we've ended here right in the centre, so I think I might do a bit of exploring.
No more questions. Q&A. And I think really what is a way of summarising what we've seen today. And I've got Joe and Claire, who I know you've seen during the day, and really going to ask a few questions, get a bit of conversation, not too long, I promise, because there is lots of food and drink to consume before we leave. But I just wanted to say thank you, both of you, for doing this, but also your contributions during the day. And I suppose a bit of insight we've asked to you, Joe, if you just could recap what the attractions of Leicester were to Long Harbour and as a city to actually come to with Build to Rent.
Yeah, of course. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, and we'll go over it again, and I'll try and go into a little bit more detail maybe this time. So when we're looking at places to buy, and we basically did a macro analysis of 64 different urban regions in the UK, and there's multiple things that went into that consideration. So it was basically a weighted score. It was things like transport links, employment opportunities. It was things like the BTR pipeline that had been delivered, that was in construction and was in planning. So we looked at all of these different metrics, and then we ranked all of these different urban areas, and Leicester came out quite high. It was 11th. So then we decided to do a little bit more of a deep dive into it, and we kind of asked ourselves, is this a place we want to invest in, and what's good about Leicester? And it turns out there's a lot which is really good about Leicester, part of it. And then finally, it was really the regeneration piece. I think Leicester as a city was kind of looked past beforehand, and what we saw in Leicester was when you go into the town centre, some really amazing public amenities, some great parks around here, some awesome historic buildings, great pubs, great restaurants, great bars. And I think Leicester gives you a lifestyle which wasn't recognised at that time, and we wanted to invest into that. And then what I said beforehand as well about students, obviously a lot of students here, the positive externalities of it. What's been fascinating about today is we didn't realise it at the time when we were underwriting, but how much of a core demographic those people from hospitals and medical workers are. And I mean, I said that for the walk of not knowing that it was the same at literally every other asset we visited. So I think that's also something which we probably learn in terms of our underwrite and the importance of medical workers into the future as a demographic.
Well, you're obviously a big enthusiast.
Yes, big enthusiast.
Tell that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I suppose to Claire, I mean, these sections here, you and Cendric operate across a number of cities.
We do, yes.
So what different, have you noticed any differences with Leicester or this site in particular to other cities?
Yeah, we have. So we're still quite in our infancy here. So we're just coming up to nearly a year of operations. If we take the kind of the sister to this particular development in Sheffield, we're already seeing a big difference in terms of the retention here. So, for example, in Sheffield, they're quite transient. There's a lot of project workers, and that ultimately impacts on the renewals and the retentions and the kind of overall operational running of the building. Whereas here, we are seeing that people are in stable employment because this particular area offers that. So ultimately, that's actually a benefit to us because people are coming here for the employment opportunities, which is great. But it also means that, and as I say, we are in our infancy, but we're already getting feedback from our residents that they would be looking to stay, and that's quite a high percentage in comparison to what we've seen elsewhere. From an operational perspective, even during the sort of initial mobilisation and lease up that we did here back in June and July of last year, I think because whilst there are BTR schemes in the area, as we've all seen today, it isn't a saturated market. There is, and each project is different in its own unique way, as we've all seen. So that is something that is very different to other areas that we operate in, whereby there are more stock, similar stock, and no variants. Whereas I think here, as you've seen, there's a huge variance in what there is to offer. It's not just 1 and 2 bed apartments in a typical building block. The amenity offering so different across all spectrums.
You know, one of the things that struck me is we've seen a real variety of schemes here. New builds built specifically for rent, and then 2 which are very different conversions. And also, what it led me to think, particularly at the John Lewis side, was what we saw there was the transition there of refurbishing, and that's going to be something which even the newest site is going to have to face at some time. So I guess you just come into here, relatively recently. But how do you see your planning for refurbishment going forward? There's a question to both of you.
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, as an operator on behalf of our clients, one of the things that we ensure and we leverage on is when we get involved in the very early onset of bringing a building to fruition, and that goes into the design and the specification to ensure that has the sustainability to last. And yes, it's not going to last 20, 30 years, because design changes, people's wants and needs change, technology changes, but where we can support our clients and invest in that at the really forefront and the onset enables us to be able to consider that life cycle and that planning. So we're doing that right at the forefront, and not on arrival into a building and looking around it and going, oh yeah, we need to plan for 5-10 years. We're doing that when it comes to the features that we're putting in and how that stacks up, not only from an energy efficiency perspective, as I say, technology plays a huge part. And it's about tying all that in to be able to support that life cycle. Yeah. And I sat on a panel a couple of months back, about a month ago now, and we were all talking about life cycle and how important that is and the considerations that need to go into it. Because the BTR sector as a whole has been, yes, it has been about long-term investment, but it's never actually been considered as to what happens in 5 or 10 years' time when you need to reinvest in the building. And I think that's really important, and that's something that we're always discussing with our clients before they've even built the building, which is quite a tricky conversation to have when you start talking about 10 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, that session was at our expo, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
It was something which we've had a whole life costing working group looking at this. Life asset management and life cycle planning it's going to be the next phase of some of the work which we're going to have to be on. And we talked this morning, Walker 2019, it's already 6 years old, looking amazing, but how are you planning for the future there?
Yeah, I think the walk-in for me is a real testament. I mean, obviously it's 6 years this month, so it's been operating for some time now. And I think for me it's a real testament to the fact that if you invest a little bit more up front in the quality of your products and what you're providing, firstly, it pays for itself in terms of life cycle costs into the future, but also it's the way to go in terms of building sustainability and not having to have those kind of awkward, essentially massive works going on in the middle of kind of your operational life cycle and horizon of the asset. I think in terms of what we're doing going forward, it's really way of life which informs our strategy. So, I mean, we have a great team on that site, and they always let us know if we need to replace something or we need to do anything. And we really rely on them to, essentially they're our trusted advisor or kind of eyes and ears on the ground in terms of life cycle, and if we need to replace anything, if we need to do any renovation work. So we do it on a case by case basis, but I guess the team there really come to support that process.